Let's go ahead and bring up Utah ballot measures, another state that I have never been to. Citizens of Utah may initiate legislation as either a direct or indirect state statute. In Utah, citizens also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. Citizens may not initiate constitutional amendments. The Utah state legislature, however, may place legislatively referred constitutional amendments on the ballot with a 2/3 majority vote of each chamber, but when put before the voters, only a simple majority of the vote is required. There is a single subject rule. In Utah, each proposed measure must address only one subject clearly expressed in the title. So most of the states I've covered so far do have this rule where you can't have like two different subjects as a part of one ballot measure. So just FYI. Restrictions. Any initiated measure that would allow, limit, or prohibit the taking of wildlife or the season for or method of taking wildlife requires a 2/3 supermajority in Utah. Competing initiatives. Utah law provides that in the event that two conflicting measures are approved, the measure with the most affirmative votes supersedes the other. The governor of Utah is responsible for determining whether two measures conflict. The decision can be appealed to the courts. Roger Meadows added here, they decided to let the government intervene on this. Number required to qualify to go on the ballot. For directly initiated statutes and veto referendums, proponents must gather signatures equal to 8% of the total number of active voters. For indirectly initiated statutes, it must be 4% of this number to qualify the initiative to go before the legislature, and an additional 4% to qualify for the ballot if the legislature does not approve the initiative. For ballot initiatives, each requirement must be met within at least 26 of the state's 29 Senate districts. For veto referendums, the requirement must be met within at least 15 of the state's 29 Senate districts. Distribution. For directly initiated state statutes, signatures must be collected from each of at least 26 of 29 Utah State Senate districts, equal to 8% of the active voters. For indirect initiatives, signatures must be collected from at least 26 of the 29 Utah State Senate districts, equal to 4%. If second round of signatures is collected, the signatures as a whole, equaling 8% of active voters, are subject to the requirement for direct initiatives. For referendum petitions, signatures must be collected from each of at least 15 of the 29 Senate districts in Utah, equal to 8% of active voters. Now, let's jump down to that first measure. I don't get into all the litigation stuff. They only had one measure in Utah. Utah Constitutional Amendment, Emergency Session Appropriation Limits Measure, where a yes vote supported this constitutional amendment to increase the limit of appropriations the state legislature could make in an emergency session from 1% of the previous fiscal year's budget to 5%. Exempt emergency federal funding from the limit and exempt any appropriations that decrease total spending for the year from the limit. This measure failed by 63.67%. Yikes. Now, who supported it? State Representative Brad Last. Brad had an argument concerning the existing limits on the legislature during emergency special sessions and the sessions that were called in 2020 in response to the pandemic. What we learned in that process is that we didn't give ourselves enough flexibility. As you will recall, we had to call ourselves into special session several times in order to accomplish what we needed to accomplish last year. So we came to a little better understanding of emergency situation that might present itself. Last also said this last year, we had a 20 billion budget. When we called ourselves into special session, we were limited to adjustments of 200 million. That's a big difference. We realized after we've gone down the road a bit, we needed to do considerably more than that. And that's pretty much it for Utah.